What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review Honey Don't, the new madcap murder mystery starring Margaret Qualley, Aubrey Plaza, and Chris Evans. And the movie is directed by Ethan Coen from the Coen brothers and co-written by Ethan Coen and his wife Trisha Cook. Although it must be said, Trisha Cook and Ethan Coen are very open about the fact that they have an open relationship, and Trisha is into girls, much like the character played by Qualley in Honey Don't. This is basically your classic hard-boiled detective scenario, where instead of having Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe or Mike Hammer at the core of it, instead we have Honey O'Donoghue, who actually lives her life very much like those other detectives from classic hard-boiled detective stories that I just mentioned. She drinks heavily, it's a point of pride, as she says in the trailer.
Do you drink?
Heavily, it's a point of pride.
Should you and I discuss this over a drink?
Tuesdays I dry out.
Today's Wednesday.
Today is Tuesday.
Every once in a while, she likes to take a girl to bed, and she very rarely makes it to a second or third date. And she likes to investigate murder mysteries and violent crime and that sort of thing in and around Bakersfield, California. And even though Bakersfield, California, in real life has about 500,000 people, as shot and as depicted in this movie, it basically feels like your classic dusty, quiet, southwestern desert town where you might have like 15 or 20 people stumbling around. And as it states over on IMDb, the story is a dark comedy about small-town private investigator Honey O'Donoghue, who delves into a series of strange deaths tied to a mysterious church.
Hector, not in the sacristy.
And not to worry, I'll go 100% spoiler-free initially, but there might be one or two details that I can't resist discussing toward the end of the video, but I'll give you a time code and a verbal warning when I do. And let me say from the word go, I did enjoy Honey Don't. I found it to be very entertaining. But if you go into it expecting one of the great movies by the Coen brothers in their heyday, back in the late 80s or the 90s or the early 2000s, you will come out disappointed. But I'll say this, any movie that is less than 90 minutes long, this movie's only 88 minutes long, and has great dialogue and great music, cool characters, lots of hot sex, lots of sexual innuendo, some brutal fucking violence. I mean, all those ingredients together, I can forgive a lot of other flaws if you're short, funny, entertaining, and sexy and violent all at once. I mean, I'm not that hard to please. And while the rest of her co-stars aren't entirely on her level, the movie is absolutely 100% worth seeing just to see Margaret Qualley in action.
You're fascinating.
And you haven't even seen the riddle tattooed on my ass.
Who's rapidly becoming my favorite actress of her generation, even when she appears in a small role in a short scene in a movie like Happy Gilmore 2. And it was absolutely fucking hysterical. That was like the one scene where they remembered this is not a legitimate sports movie. It's a comedy. She takes a lot of really big swings. And some people might say, well, Emma Stone takes big swings. There are other actresses out there taking big swings. But when you look at Margaret Qualley's career, going back just like the last 10 years, she's racked up a pretty incredible filmography in a very short time, starting with The Nice Guys in 2016. Obviously, The Leftovers, she was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, she was one of the best parts of that movie by far. She pops up in video games like Death Stranding and that sort of thing. She'll do like weird music videos and like erotic short films and things like that. Or she'll pop up in a small role in Poor Things. And she worked with Yorgos Lanthimos again in Kinds of Kindness. But obviously it was The Substance last year where a lot of people were like, holy shit, she is just balls through the wall, insane, totally fearless. And I saw an interview with her recently where she was joking about the fact that her mother, Andie MacDowell, I grew up watching Andie MacDowell in movies like Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Her mother's an absolute legend. She's incredible. But in this interview, she was joking about the fact that anytime she makes a new movie or takes a big swing, Andie MacDowell and her friends are like, is this a movie that we can see? Or is this a movie that you made for like you and all your crazy friends? And chances are these days, just about every movie is something geared towards her crazy friends. And I'm just, I'm here for all of it. I think she's just absolutely fantastic. And she steals each and every single scene in which she appears in this movie. She just has this incredibly confident, kind of relaxed sense of easygoing charm where she's able to brush aside or fend off the constant advances from the horny single men in Bakersfield, while at the same time, very aggressively pursuing her own form of sin and vice in her spare time. But like a true professional, like a great detective, she keeps her work and her love life totally separate. When she's in work mode, she's got balls of steel and she can absolutely fuck people up. But more than anything, she's just a clever, reliable detective without being like superhuman in any way, shape, or form. And at night, when she clocks out, then she's ready to pound some booze and get it on with Aubrey Plaza.
Honey, right? Love those click-clacking heels.
And without saying what, where, why, or how, there are a few scenes involving Aubrey Plaza. At a minimum, they will raise a few eyebrows. It'll raise the temperature of the room. There's one couple in my theater. The theater was almost completely empty, but there's one couple where like anytime things started to get a little steamy, they're like, oh, like they were like, groaning in horror. I was like, It's 2025. We're in the East Village. I saw it at the Village East Angelica, which is a fantastic theater. Really cool old-fashioned theater here in Lower Manhattan. It's like if you go see an Ethan Coen movie in the Village about a lesbian detective, what are you expecting? Or maybe there's some people out there who still just walk up to the movies and just buy a ticket to a movie, just a random one, sight unseen. But just to put it in context for people who aren't familiar with New York geography or New York culture, the East Village, where that theater is located, it's a bohemian neighborhood. It's nothing but restaurants and bars and comedy clubs. It's basically the cheaper equivalent to the West Village, just a little bit crazier and a little bit younger. So if you go to a movie theater in the East Village, hey, you're probably going to see there's probably going to be some outrageous shit on the menu. In any case, these people at least pretended to be shocked and aghast at the sexual antics on display in this movie. But it's not even that sexual. Like, there's a hint of nudity here and there. It's usually a really funny scenario that's unfolding in the context of the sex, like we see in the trailer when Chris Evans is having a fucking three-way when somebody shows up trying to blow his brains out.
Hector, not in the sacristy.
And as far as Chris Evans goes, I like the fact that he's drawn to this kind of material, even if he's not necessarily the best performance in the movie. He's a little bit too self-conscious, too self-aware, a little bit like he's like winking at the audience, like, aren't we having fun making fun of this strange fictional church that's dealing drugs out of one door and having orgies through the other. But at least these days he's taking a few chances, taking a few risks, working on projects that have much lower budgets than he used to work with over like in the MCU when he was Captain America. Like earlier this summer he worked with A24 Materialists, and here we have him working with Focus Features on Honey Don't. And he did make me laugh a few times. There are just other scenes where I was like, dude, try to get emotionally invested in the role where it feels authentic, where it feels real. And who knows, maybe Chris Evans is just a good-looking, handsome, athletic dude. Maybe he doesn't have those dimensions within him. But with Margaret Qualley, there is 100% emotional investment. When she speaks, it's like you can believe that she has been this girl for the last 25 years and that this is her life, this is her livelihood. Like, you believe everything about it. And when you have a lead who's really just like putting everything into this one particular part, everybody else is just going to get blasted off the screen unless they put forward a similar level of effort. But I'll say this, Charlie Day was pretty goddamn funny in this. Charlie Day plays a police officer who just can't quite get the message that Margaret Qualley's character is into the ladies, and he just keeps saying like, oh, like, you want to have a drink and like discuss cases and discuss work, blah, blah. He just keeps, but it's so good-natured and so sincere. But she just keeps gently turning him down and telling him, you're my favorite man in the community. But obviously, yeah, she's not really into dudes, especially guys who put their hands on women in a fit of anger, or who murder women or drive them off cliffs and that sort of thing. So I would say there's not necessarily an axe to grind with this movie, but you can definitely tell that at least Trisha Cook, she's inserting certain ingredients about girls who get beat up by their boyfriends or daughters who get beat up by their fathers. And the character of Honey is not necessarily on the war path, but when opportunities present themselves where she can put those guys in their place, she absolutely will do so. But I worry that even by saying that, people are going to misinterpret me and think that this movie is some giant feminist diatribe, like, preaching for the castration of all males. It's absolutely not that in any way, shape, or form. It's actually overall a very lighthearted movie, very enjoyable movie. Just every once in a while, it's punctuated by moments of, real drama or real violence or real lust, whatever the case might be. But as far as other good ingredients go, Carter Burwell's back as the composer. And for people who know their Coen brothers history, Carter Burwell's basically been the third Coen brother for many, many decades. Going back to the very first Coen brothers movie, Blood Simple, Carter Burwell's there as the composer, and he composed the score to Raising Arizona. He composed the score to Miller's Crossing and Barton Fink, and the list goes on and on. You cannot have a movie by either Joel or Ethan Coen or both without a score by Carter Burwell. And a lot of the songs that are in here are kind of like rock and roll standards or rock and roll classics from the 50s or 60s with like a fresh coat of paint. I mean, as soon as I saw the title for the movie and I saw the trailer, I immediately started hearing in my head my favorite version of Honey Don't. It was written by, hang on, I wrote it down earlier, Carl Perkins. I should know that, but I had to write it down just in case. But I learned how to play Honey Don't on the bass back in 8th grade, and I was listening to Beatles for Sale a lot at that time, and my bass teacher was trying to teach me how to do like walking bass lines, like boom, 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 boom. In any case, throughout the entire movie, I kept fucking hearing Ringo Starr and the lyrics to the song kind of bouncing around the back of my brain. I don't know if everybody else has listened to Beatles for Sale as many times as I have, but I think that's one of the most underrated Beatles albums, where it's not really an early Beatles. It's not really like She Loves You or I Want to Hold Your Hand era, but it's not their psychedelic era. It's kind of a tweener, and I just think it's, if you're into British rock from the 1960s, Beetle for Sale is tough to beat, and Honey Don't, even Ringo, who can barely sing a note, is pretty goddamn good as the singer for Honey Don't. But John Lennon would sing the song when they performed it in public. But if I had to offer one reservation or criticism of the movie, I think it's a little thin and perhaps a little disposable and forgettable, where it's fun while you watch it, but it's not necessarily something like Miller's Crossing, where you're going to want to come back and watch it over and over and over again.
It's my nature, Tom. I can't help it. Somebody hands me an angle, I play it. I don't deserve to die for that. Do you think I do?
And show it to your brothers and show it to your friends and show it to your grandchildren or whatever. It's not one of those movies that really resonates or didn't really resonate with me. I absolutely was enjoying it while watching it, but it reminded me a little bit of like picking up a trashy bestseller before you take a flight or before going to the beach or taking a long train ride, where you enjoy it and kind of forget it all at once, and then I'm just kind of chucking the paperback aside when that trip is over. I worry that Honey Don't will feel a little bit disposable like that. And while the movie's filled with a giant cast of colorful characters and all sorts of twists and turns and little miniature subplots, a lot of those subplots really don't pay off. There's one major subplot when it comes to the villains of the story. I was like, that's your explanation? It just feels so random and abrupt and kind of shoved in. It just doesn't feel supported by the rest of the narrative. So structurally, the movie is more weak than your typical Coen Brothers movie. However, because the characters are charming, because the dialogue is so good, and because individual scenes are so spectacular, I can forgive a lot of the flaws. Like if you look at the career of the Coen Brothers, like the good, the bad, and the mediocre. Now I might as well plug right now. I did a video, I think 2 years ago, summarizing their entire career, all their movies that I love and adore, and I'll leave a link to that down below. But not all their movies are created equal. Some of them are a little bit disposable, a little bit forgettable, especially when they're going into lighthearted terrain. I would argue that Hail Caesar is enjoyable but forgettable. Maybe Hail Caesar's a tad better than this, but not by much if so. But if you enjoyed Hail Caesar, you will absolutely enjoy Honey Don't. Burn After Reading is also a little disposable. Hilarious at times, very funny. I enjoy Burn After Reading. There's even a line of dialogue by John Malkovich in that, which he repeats frequently in that movie, which comes up in Honey Don't. It's like, yeah, I can see that Ethan Coen wrote both movies. And speaking of Ethan Coen, it's funny, when you watch this movie, at no point are the visuals particularly dynamic or bold or anything like that. If I were to guess when it comes to how do the Coen brothers divide their duties when they're working together, I suspect that Ethan Coen handles more of the dialogue, while Joel Coen handles more of what's inside the frame. I have no evidence to support that, apart from just seeing what Ethan Coen's movies are like in Joel Coen's absence versus Joel Coen's movie, his Macbeth movie, which he made in the absence of Ethan. Macbeth had incredibly bold visuals, while Drive Away Dolls and Honey Don't have great dialogue, but not necessarily bold visuals. So it's interesting seeing like what they're like when they're apart. A little bit like John Lennon and Paul McCartney, where they were great separate, but together they're better. And I was doing a little bit more scrolling in the Coen brothers. I'd say that Honey Don't is better than The Lady Killers, and it's better than Intolerable Cruelty. That was a brief moment in the career of the Coen brothers in the early 2000s where I worried that I was going to kind of fall out of love with their movies. But then, of course, they came out with No Country for Old Men in 2007. I was like, oh, all right, maybe the best is yet to come. And they went on to do True Grit and some other good stuff, or Inside Llewyn Davis. Yeah, the Coen brothers have a lot of really good movies to their name. And I think one of the best things they ever did is fairly, recent in my memory compared to some of the movies that I saw growing up. I saw Raising Arizona when I was 11. I've been watching their movies my entire fucking life. But The Ballad of Buster Scruggs in 2018, that first bit with the singing cowboy who's really good at shooting people, I've seen that like 7 or 8 times. It's one of my favorite short films that they ever did, or one of my favorite films they ever did. It just happens to be a short one, but the reality is, yeah, it's the late 80s through the 90s where they made their best stuff. Fargo, I think I've seen Fargo 25 times.
So, you were having sex with a little fella then?
Uh-huh.
Is there anything else you can tell me about him?
No. Like I say, he was funny looking. More than most people, even.
The Big Lebowski, who the hell knows how many times I've seen that movie, but just talking about it and quoting it with friends and thinking about certain scenes will always make me laugh until my dying day.
Wave of the future, dude. 100% electronic.
Well, I still jerk off manually.
Of course you do.
So long story short, Honey Don't is not on the level of Blood Simple. It's not on the level of Raising Arizona. It's not on the level of Miller's Crossing or Barton Fink or any of their essential classics. Man, I fucking love the Coen Bros. I love A Brother Where Art Thou. It's like they have so many movies that I can't even do a proper top 10 list of all my favorite movies by them because not enough movies will fit onto the list. So I've been watching these guys my entire life, and no matter what Joel and Ethan do for the rest of their careers, anytime they write a book or make a movie or create a play or whatever, I will always be first in line, even if I recognize perhaps the greatest moments of their careers might be in the rearview mirror. But even if I don't regard Honey Don't as being one of the best movies of Ethan Coen's career, the role of Honey could very easily end up becoming one of the best roles of Margaret Qualley's career. She's really fucking spectacular in this, and maybe now's as good a time as any for one or two spoilerific details, because there are just one or two scenes I want to call attention to before I wrap up this video. But as far as individual scenes that deserve a shout out are concerned, there's one scene in this movie that really got my attention. It's a scene in a bar where Margaret Qualley and Aubrey Plaza are having their first date, and you have a private investigator and a cop who are going on a date. So they go to like a cop bar where you drink shots of tequila or bourbon or whatever, and they're sitting there at the bar and they just start kind of fondling and caressing each other while drinking, and like they're talking about pretty superficial concerns because it's the end of the workday. But as the heavy petting starts to intensify, Margaret Qualley's acting was just absolutely next level, because Aubrey Plaza's absolutely, making her move, and Qualley's character Honey is trying desperately to maintain appearances to the public. But she's got beads of sweat forming on her forehead, and she's getting short of breath, and there's not an ounce of nudity or a trace of nudity in the entire scene. It is a really hot, sexy scene, and admittedly, that scene is probably designed for like middle-aged lesbians, or who knows, maybe younger lesbians to enjoy, but I don't mind getting the leftovers when it comes to a scene as good as that. And the movie also just includes some pretty wild details when it comes to the paraphernalia of people's various kinks and perversions and preoccupations sexually and that sort of thing. Like the uniform underneath the uniforms for some of the people at this church are pretty wild, and you see them in the trailer. Or there's one scene in the movie which is very loving and affectionate, but at the same time kind of kinky, where after a night of some pretty heavy activity between Plaza and Qualley, and the following morning we see Qualley doing the dishes. And she's got a big sink full of like soapy suds, but she's not like putting away like coffee mugs and plates and that sort of thing. She's putting away the toys that they were using for their the wondrous exchange of bodily fluids. And the way she's kind of smiling at them affectionately as she hangs them up to dry, I was like, wow, all right. This is the kind of detail that you get when Trisha Cook, who's into ladies, is one of your screenwriting partners on your movie. And one final shout out, I need to tip my hat to the lovely Lyra Obova, who plays the kind of French criminal mastermind in this movie.
The French, they're not happy.
Who's not happy?
And she looks so much like Sophie Marceau and acts so much like her. I was like, she must be Sophie Marceau's daughter, who's now here to kind of carry on the tradition. My suspicions were absolutely wrong, but if you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. But like Sophie Marceau, she is not shy. I mean, like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, we get full-blown, full frontal nudity. I was like, all right, any movie that gives me full frontal nudity in the first couple of minutes, probably going somewhere interesting. But I did enjoy her performance as this kind of mysterious French puppet master who's not afraid to resort to some pretty deadly measures when it comes to making sure that the trains run on time when it comes to her criminal organization. But getting back to Margaret Qualley and her taste in projects, I mentioned earlier, she's drawn toward outrageous material. She's absolutely fearless. Even a movie that's not necessarily that good, she will be really fucking good in it. I mean, a perfect example would be last year's movie by Yorgos Lanthimos, Kinds of Kindness, which was not one of Yorgos Lanthimos' strongest movies. However, anytime Margaret Qualley's in it, you cannot look away from the screen. I mean, there's certain cutaways in that movie which are burned into my fragile, warped imagination. But yeah, she's just absolutely fantastic in this movie. I hate the expression they understood the assignment because it's become such a cliche, but I don't know what kind of research she did for this movie or how she got kind of in the mindset of this private investigator, but perhaps she just knew in her bones how this character needed to dress and how she needed to walk and how she needed to present herself, but she's got a very specific way of kind of interacting with the outside world, or who knows, maybe she buried herself in hard-boiled paperbacks from the 1940s or 1950s. Whatever her process is, the final result was fantastic. And she's also got some pretty sick dance moves. She doesn't show them off in this movie, but there was a music video for the movie, the song called Odd Wad, if I'm saying that correctly. It's by Lace Manhattan, but it's from the motion picture soundtrack for Honey Don't. But a couple weeks ago, I saw these outrageous clips in black and white of Margaret just dancing her fucking ass off. I was like, what the fuck is this? It's just a music video to help promote the movie. She obviously got to show off a lot of her moves in the substance, and those scenes were fucking hysterical. But I think she needs to make just a full-blown, down and out musical, like old-fashioned, kick-ass musical where she can really show off her stuff. But getting back to the subject of Ethan Coen and whether or not his best films are behind him, I mean, he's nearly 70 years old. Very few filmmakers suddenly start making better movies in their 70s. There are a few rare exceptions, like Paul Verhoeven made really good movies in his 70s, but those examples are rare. But the reality is, for 40 years, Ethan Coen has just been giving us solid gold. Is every movie created equal? No, but goddamn, he has written and produced and directed some of the best movies of the last, like, half century. But as far as Margaret Qualley is concerned in her career, the very best of her career might still be yet to come. We very well might be at the beginning of her best movie-making years throughout her 30s and 40s. But I think as long as she continues to make such a willful and deliberate effort to find kind of wild, outrageous material that kind of shocks her mother and her friends, and as long as she continues to work with filmmakers like Yorgos Lanthimos or Ethan Coen or what is the director of The Substance? Coralie Farjit. I'm sure I'm fucking up the pronunciation of her name. In any case, as long as she continues to make movies like The Substance, I think the chances are high that some very good movies might be in the cards for us in the years to come when it comes to the very lovely and very talented Margaret Qualley. But I think at this point I need to cut myself off. If I go any further, people are going to start to suspect I'm some sort of psychotic stalker like you would see in a movie like Honey Don't. But let me know what you think down in the comments below, and please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell if you enjoyed this review. But I hope everybody has a great weekend at the movies, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.